doing the whole 6010.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football presented by Wingstop. My name is Daniel Dopp here with my two best friends, Field Yates and Mike Clay. We're doing it old school today, guys. Old school back in Studio E, not in Studio W. You've known us in Studio W, the big NFL Live studio. But there is a big thing going on in there today. So we're back in our old stomping grounds, back here in our digital Studio E. It's so great to have you here, Field, as you are every single day, every single week without ever taking a day off. Mike Clay, I cannot believe that you're here. So great to have you back from your vacation. How was your middle of the week, middle of the season even vacation?
It was good. It was good to visit New York City. Always a fine time down there. Had some nice food.
Where'd you go?
Some activities. We went to a few family meal.
Nice.
Family meal. Nice little dinner there. A couple other spots. But it was good to do that and come back here. And while I was gone, one thing I did have some wings while I was down there. And now I see Wingstop. Since I've been gone and back, now suddenly wings have shown up. I think maybe they're trying to entice me back to the show here a little bit.
Is that what it is?
There's one problem though. I don't see any wings anywhere.
Not yet.
We can work on that.
Yeah, we're gonna work on that.
That's not.
I love that
this is going to make me hungry.
Mike Clay has been gone so long that we've changed sponsors on the show.
Yep.
Liz Loza has been here. Liz lives in California. I don't know if you knew that, Mike. Yeah. She's been on the show more recently than you, and she lives on the other side of the country. That's so obviously, it's great to know how much you care about all of our listeners' fantasy teams, that you take a vacation in the middle of week 11.
I know I do all my other stuff. I just don't care about you guys. It's like I care about the work. I'm doing the articles, the rankings, the projections, FF Now.
Yeah.
Do all that.
Two important thoughts here. It's great to have you back, Mike. I mean that sincerely. And by the way, you were actually being a man of the people. You were just getting everybody else ready for what is Buy-Mageddon Part 1 in Week 12 and Buy-Mageddon Part 2 in Week 14. When you took a personal bye week just in Week 11. Second of all, what sound does a turkey's phone make when you call it?
What?
I would think it would go gobble, 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 gobble.
Okay, good guesses by both of you. The actual answer is wing, wing. Just in the vein of Wingstop.
Wing, wing.
Okay, well done. But you remember that was from one of my dad jokes last year.
Oh, was it?
Week 18. Remember Week 18 with the paper?
I do remember that.
Oh,
wing, 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 and you wrinkled up the paper.
This is why you're not allowed to do dad jokes and why I keep track of mine.
That's why they're in a database.
Yes, exactly. So they're not repeated.
At the physical therapy clinic that I go to, the great Chase is there, and he is the dad joke specialist, and he always writes one on the whitebboard. So every morning I'm in there, and I'm like, oh, what?
That explains your new material.
Oh, that's so good.
No, I had a good one yesterday. I sent Mike. I don't want to spoil it only because I think there's a chance that Mike will use it on FF Now, but let me tell you, it was a doozy.
Oh, yeah? I can't wait. I'm ready for it.
I will use it just to see what the reaction is from everyone else. If there's just dead silence, I could blame you.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Blame you when it
else
happens.
is new.
That's so good.
Anyway.
Well, listen, speaking of PTs, I do want to give a quick shout out to my guy, Logan Lamb. My mom calls him Logan Love because he is my mom's physical therapist back home in Michigan. However, he is a Packers fan. And so like a little bit of, she was like, he's the Jordan Love of PTs, which I think is meant to be a positive thing.
Inconsistent?
No, see, and that's the thing. I had to kind of explain to Mom and Dopp that's like Jordan Love is a good quarterback, but he's not like the top of the echelon.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but we do love Logan out there taking care of Mom and Dopp. Shout out to all the PTs that are doing good things for our bodies. You know what
100%.
I mean?
Yeah, my shoulder is feeling great right now. Largely in part because of the great P team over here in West Hartford. I thought you were going to say Logan is the Jordan Love of PTs in Michigan because there was this guy who had been there at this specific physical therapy clinic for a long time. And he had an outstanding reputation. And then once he left, everybody was like, oh, wait, that guy's like cranking and like kind of like not performing. Like maybe it was time to move on and get Logan into the top chair.
That's right. You know, it's so weird.
Sorry to Jets fans.
We're gonna dive into rankings today, obviously, as we always do on Wednesday. But I saw the news that the Jets fired their GM, but Aaron Rodgers is still there. So I'm confused as to how that worked out because I thought Aaron Rodgers was the GM of that team.
Correct. Yes, I think they actually gave him an advanced title. He's the GM head coach. We could do honestly. Like I know that this podcast is fantasy driven, so we'll stop here. But geez, I think the most important question that you have to answer when you get hired as the next GM or the next head coach, which is very different than when you are normally hired as a GM or a head coach, is what direction do you want to take? Usually the direction is served up on the platter for you, right? A lot of the jobs when the GM opens, like if the Jaguars GM job opens, the idea is we got to rebuild this thing, right? Because we're bad and our roster has a lot of roster holes.
Yep.
least we have a quarterback. For the Jets, you have to decide, like, am I going to be the GM that takes over and immediately says, cut Aaron Rodgers and cut Devontae Adams? Because if you don't cut those guys, you can't take next year. Like, you got to find a way to be or try to be competitive. It's a fascinating dilemma that the Jets face right now, and hopefully they get it right, because I feel bad for my tortured Jets fans friends who every single Monday morning wake up and say to me, why do I do this to myself?
Yeah, it's tough. And they have a lot of a lot of people criticize him because Aaron Rodgers just handpicked all these old teammates and it's all veterans and they tried to patch it together. They have a lot of good homegrown talent too, like Sauce Gardner being a key example, but they have to re-sign all those guys, right? And there's a few in the O-line and there's a lot on defense. That's part of the challenge. Garrett Wilson, obviously Breece Hall in the backfield. You have to re-sign all those guys and figure out quarterback. My guess is Rodgers out. You're gonna probably have a top 10 pick at this point. Try to get a quarterback. Try to get a top quarterback.
My guess on the Rodgers thing is that it's probably Rodgers' decision. Like, and he may say, I want to move on. I either want to move to a new chapter of my life or I want to go play somewhere else. We digress. Let's talk about the rankings.
Anyway,
let's dive into it. Yeah, speaking of holes, you probably have a lot of holes to fill in your roster this week with 6 teams on a bye.
Ugh, gross.
Rankings are going to be something for us to dive into. Let's start at the top when we look at some of these teams on bye. The Atlanta Falcons, the Buffalo Bengals, the Buffalo Bills, the Cincinnati Bengals, Jacksonville Jaguars, New Orleans Saints, and the aforementioned New York Jets. That was a big word, guys.
Yeah, that was nice. That was really well done.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, so we have six on a bye, then none for Thanksgiving. Although it's going to feel like by Sunday, it's going to feel like
none.
Like none, because all them teams have already played. And then 6 more buys the next week, as Field pointed out. And then we're done. That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Again, I went on my rant yesterday about why that's a completely ridiculous plan by the NFL. I do think they should reconsider it in future years. I understand they probably won't, but you should be more mindful of your fantasy audience. It sucks this week. I am not thrilled about some of the rosters that I have that are particularly Cincinnati and Buffalo heavy, because all of a sudden I am starting some absolutely wild card players at various spots in the roster.
Well, hey, it worked for Liz Loza against me in the FF Now League last week.
I love it.
She's like Saturday just picking up random dudes off, off waivers Saturday. And
Liz has the magic
team. Yeah, she does.
Magic touch, and
she cares enough to be here for the people. That's probably why.
I'm so mad.
That's what you get for not showing up to work.
I thought Christian Watson and I were friends.
Dude, right?
I thought we were friends. And then she's like, I'm literally just going to pick him up and start him against you because I'm desperate and it'll be funny if he crushes you. And what does he do? He
crushes
best
you.
Game since last season, 19 points. And what's the difference? Like, if he scores 5 fewer points, I win.
Yeah, we'll dive into a couple of these things that drive us crazy about fantasy football towards the end of the show as well. But let's start at the quarterback spot, looking at the rankings here in week 12. As a reminder, with those 6 teams on a bye, you've got no Josh Allen and no Joe Burrow. Starting at QB1, we've got Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray, and Brock Purdy, rounding out the top 5, 6 through 10. Justin Herbert, Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes, second week in a row inside the top 10, and Tua rounding out the top 10 there. I want to dive into really quickly Bo Nix. This guy's star just continues to rise, man.
Yeah.
It feels like we're in a spot. First 3 weeks, he finished outside the top 20 in 3 of his 4 first weeks at the position. And now, since then, I think he's in line to be a guy that we're looking at inside the top 10 from here on out. If I had to ask you, I've asked you this before, but Mike, if I had to ask you at the quarterback spot, you want to start a quarterback, what's the least number of points that you feel confident getting and you're not going to complain about the output that you got?
If he's your starter, I mean, on a bad week, like 15 or something, right?
So
like
my line is 16. If he gets 16 points, I think I can't be upset about it. That's a fine week. He's not going to crush you. Sure, I would have wanted more, but I can't complain about 16 fantasy points. He's had at least 16 fantasy points in 6 of his last 7 weeks. He has been absolutely dominant, and it feels like, in spite of the fact that there really aren't that many weapons in this Broncos offense, he continues to get the job done.
Not much of a little Jordan Humphrey fan.
You know what?
Yeah. They just have a lot of pretty good players. Obviously, Cortland Sutton, I think, is maybe a cut above that. But I think what's so fascinating about Bo is early on in the season, what were we telling you about some of those big fantasy weeks? We were like, this guy is just rushing the football so much. Over the last 2 games, trivia. How many rushing yards does Bo Nix have over the last 2 games combined?
160
last 2 games. I will say 36.
160.
0.
What? No, he doesn't. No way. Didn't he have?
Maybe I can't read well.
I don't know. Maybe
we're about to find out.
We're gonna find out.
I thought he had a handful last week. He still has 295 on the season.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. But he is. In the meantime, he has been lighting up through the air, though. He's picked it up there.
Talk about that while I talk about the other stuff.
Career high 4 passing touchdowns last week. Also 307 yards in that game. 2 or more passing touchdowns in 5 of his last 7 games. To your point, Daniel, the points have been there. He's 16 plus in 6 of 7 and 14 in the other. So he hasn't crushed you pretty much at all. And this week draws the Raiders. 18 passing touchdowns allowed this season. Sixth most to quarterbacks. The Raiders.
Raiders.
Thank you.
That's why he's here.
Thank you. That's it.
By the way, these teams played earlier this season. This is one of 2 rematches this week. Bo Nix, 23.1 points, 3 total touchdowns in that game. So we feel good about him as a streamer.
So, by the way, there's like very few feelings in life that are more sinking than when you bring a stat to the table and Mike Clay immediately is like, what? Excuse me? No way. Bo Nix this is week 12 now, right?
We're heading into week 12.
11, he had 2 carries for 5 yards.
Okay.
Long rush, 3 yards. In week 10, he had 3 carries for -5 yards.
All right, you're right.
Look at that.
So what is 5 plus -5?
I believe that is 0.
0, right?
Yep. Yeah. All right, good call. You win.
So, and by the way, if you go back 2 more weeks prior to that, he had 4 rushing yards. We had 36 in between, but in his last 4 games, he has 3 with 5 or fewer rushing yards. So it only further illustrates the point that Bo is balling in more ways than one.
You know what? I'm mixing him up with Drake May. That's what it is. He had 24 last week. Anyway,
that's what
Drake's
it was.
running the ball plenty.
All right.
Not designed running.
Over the just for what it's worth, we're talking about those last 7 weeks that he's had, where he's been a pretty good quarterback for you. 15 passing and rushing touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. Part of what he's doing is he's keeping his floor high by not turning the ball over, which I feel like is really awesome, especially as a rookie quarterback here. You love to be able to see rookie quarterbacks be able to do that.
I asked Mike what we asked earlier in the week. Rest of the season, rank these 4 rookie quarterbacks in terms of your desire to have them.
Okay.
Bo Nix, this is fantasy. Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams.
Daniels first, for sure. I know he's been down a little bit lately, but I think I'll bounce back. So Daniels 1. Then Nix.
Okay.
And then, was it May and Caleb?
Yep.
May and Caleb is a close call. I think I'd probably lean toward May. Caleb has a tough schedule. So
we're talking about, it's funny because like when we were debating it on Monday, it was like, we think we know 3 and 4 pretty easily. Like it's Drake May and then it's Caleb Williams. It's 1 versus 2. That's kind of an interesting debate. And we had sort of a split panel. Wow. It's close, man.
So you guys are fading on Jaden too?
We're not fading, but I think it's more 1A, 1B. I don't think it's a clear-cut 1 and a clear-cut 2.
Yeah, like this. Yeah. All right, fair enough.
I don't know how. I truly believe that Jaden's recent regression is totally due to his ribs.
Yeah, okay.
This is a great opportunity on Sunday, obviously, to get right. If he does not get right against the Cowboys, then the concerns go way, way up. But he hasn't been.
Yeah, that's right.
A long time to see a top 5 week. Yeah.
I mean, again, last week there was a little bit of like, okay, is this Eagles D legit? If they are, Jaden might have a bad game. And he did. I mean, Eagles defense, I mean, that was their toughest opponent in a while, but they delivered in a big way again. So that could be part of it as well.
Gloating city here. All right,
I love it. I mean, Lions and Eagles. I mean, both defenses crushing.
Collision course of the NFC Championship game.
So.
Let's hope that happens.
What would you guys do?
What would we do?
Would you guys like bet your own house? Like, hey, I will bet. Like, if the Lions win, Daniel inherits Mike's house, and if the Eagles win,
for me.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Eagles, if you win, then you just get Daniel's house. Just keep it. Like you also keep your own house.
Okay.
It's not a trade house.
That'd be a vacation house.
I was talking with my buddy Kurt about this because like the Eagles are actually probably the team in the NFC I don't want to face because Jalen Hurts is so good. Saquon Barkley is one of the best, if not the best running back in at least the NFC right now. You look at both of those wide receivers, like they're just loaded with offensive talent. Ideally, what happens is they do the same thing they did last year and then just fall apart here down the stretch. Yes. Yeah.
Every NFC team does that except for the Lions.
Let's hope.
Lions are going to be hard to beat.
Richardson time.
All right, let's dive into quarterbacks 11 through 20. If you need a couple of other guys down here towards the second half of the quarterback ranking, starting at QB 11, Jared Goff, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, and Jordan Love round out the top 15, 16 through 20. Anthony Richardson, Drake May, CJ Stroud, Tommy DeVito.
That's not his name.
There he is.
Tommy Cullitz.
Cute.
And Jamison Winston.
Amos.
So did I say? I always say Jameson. I can't help it because Jameson Williams is always in my head. It's not my fault.
Can't blame you.
Mike, Field and I have already had this conversation a little bit this week on Anthony Richardson because we showed up to work in order to do things for the people. I do want to ask you about Anthony Richardson. How do you feel about him after what was a really nice game back as the starter?
Yes, some reason for optimism if you need a streamer going forward. It's going to be a while, I think, before we were comfortable with him as a clear-cut QB1. That's not going to just end up benched or with 5 fantasy points because he's been all over the map. 8 career full games now, 20 plus in 4 of them, and averaged 26.2 fantasy points in those games, but under 12 points in the other 4, 8.8 points per game. I mean, he has been either not in the middle, one or the other in his full game so far, and that's concerning. And two of those good games were this season, including last week. So that's good. I mean, in terms of this week, I don't think I'm in on Richardson as a streamer this week against the Lions.
Agreed.
They faced the 3rd most pass attempts this year, but have allowed a league low 7 passing touchdowns. It's hard to believe. They've allowed 7 passing touchdowns this season, which is unreal. 6 fewest fantasy points. No quarterback has reached 21.6 against them. That's the most they've allowed to a quarterback. So this isn't the week.
Daniel did research last night.
I did.
He shared it with me, not with you. So
I did. Yeah. Lions are giving up the 6th fewest points per game to quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are averaging 13.4 points per game against the Lions. They've only given up 4 games over 14.8 fantasy points. And like you just mentioned, 7 touchdowns on the season. In spite of the fact that they're beating the pants off of basically everybody, which means every quarterback is having to throw the ball. They're giving up a ton of yards, but quarterbacks aren't able to get in the end zone like you mentioned. What they are doing is they're throwing interceptions. 7 touchdowns, 14 interceptions so far this year. I do think that this is one of those situations where if you're looking at a spot how Anthony Richardson can break the mold of those other quarterbacks, it's with his legs at the goal line. So there's a chance maybe you have a little bit more upside because of that. Those 10 designed runs that he had last week, Field, maybe gives you a little bit more oomph if you need a second quarterback in a super flex league or if you're in a really deep league. But ideally, I am staying away from Anthony Richardson against the Lions.
Okay, so just to be clear, Mike, he didn't share that with me exclusively. I'm in a group thread amongst 10 Michigan men, 12 of us actually, in a fantasy football league. Me as a lifelong Lions fan, obviously.
Yes, exactly.
Obviously.
Yes.
So Daniel and the rest of the Lions fans clan, we're all talking about those ridiculous numbers. So I don't want you to feel like jealous or excluded.
Oh, I'm not at all.
I love. Oh, wow. That's all right. There's already not a lot of love for Mike Clay in that, given the fact how much you hate Jared Goff. And
so
that's
then,
very well known.
On top of that, I don't know why I just grabbed this microphone, but it felt like the right thing to do. But on top of that, Richardson is like, I think that your numbers that you were sharing are pertinent in a lot of ways, but I also think that people who are debating the merits of Anthony Richardson are going to start to look at the sample from week 11 on. What I mean by that is if Anthony Richardson, after doing it last week, does it again this week, then coming out of the bye, which they have a bye next week no, they don't. The Colts have their bye week 14, excuse me. So if he mashes again this week, I guarantee you he will either be added in a significant number of leagues, started in a significant number of leagues, or both next week.
Who are they playing on Thanksgiving?
The Colts?
You know?
That's a great question. I'll look it up right now.
Never mind. I'm sorry. Ignore me. I had a brain fart there.
The Lions are playing the Bears, which is where your brain was going to.
Brain
I got it. Yeah.
Anyway.
Anywho, yes, I do think that.
Yeah, Colts. Colts next week. I don't know. Look, I'm with you. I think if he is another big game, you feel like, all right, now he's back on the streaming radar if the matchup's good for next week. And then it's like, if he does it again, then you're like, all right, maybe there's something here. But I just have a hard time believing we saw so much poor production for a month straight to the point that he was benched that I don't know. When does that risk kind of go away? Like, what do we see?
I'm not sure it ever goes away. I mean, a season straight and I'd feel good about things, but I'm just telling you, I think that knowing how people manage their fantasy football rosters, if he goes ham again this week, and has 20 plus fantasy points, and we see a lot of the similar usage as we saw last week, specifically if the Colts get near the goal line and it's Anthony Richardson and not Jonathan Taylor who's getting first crack at it, then we were talking about a guy who I do believe will be a top 10 option in a lot of people's eyes going into week 13.
All right, fair. Yeah, we'll talk more about that goal line stuff in a second here.
Yes, we will. I love whenever I pull a bunch of notes and then what I know is what happens is Mike has just this like malware set up on my computer to be able to just take all of a variety.
Here's how it works, people, is Mike. So Daniel and I, we go through True Media, which is this great resource we have, and we just pour over a variety of different stats, and it takes forever. And we think about it and we get so excited and we're so proud.
Passionate.
And Mike is like, oh, you did that? He's like, well, on my computer, if you just press SR2, it gets all of those numbers right away. Because Mike programmed his computer years ago to be so much better than anything that Daniel and I could ever pull.
That's partially true.
It's SR3?
SR3.
SR3, yeah.
That's what it is.
SR3.
Let's talk about this. We're going to dive into a couple of different rankings things as well. It's a rankings show. We're going to lean into the rankings bit here. Field, obviously, in this very studio.
Yes.
earlier this year, we did a Hot Wings challenge, and now we've got a sponsor in Wingstop. Yep. So I want you to rank these things for us, if you don't mind.
Wingstop has incredible wings.
They're so good.
Full stop, Wingstop is the best.
This isn't even fair. I want that cup to be filled with wing sauce, and then I want a plate of wings so I could be eating.
Exactly.
You make that happen the next time we're in the studio.
Rank these flavors and quarterbacks for us, Field. All right, and they're talking about wings here. Hot barbecue, garlic parmesan, lemon pepper, and then Bo Nix, Drake May, and Anthony Richardson. How would you rank those 7 things?
Okay, so they are all being ranked together. This is not, I'm ranking the quarterbacks and then I am ranking the
No, you're doing it all together in life.
This is important for context. We got to understand how much you really love, like, or hate these things.
Well, because these are wings provided by Wingstop, let's start here. Normally, I would not be feeling this way. But because I have some scar tissue from the last time I was sitting in this seat,
it's fair.
That will be lower than before.
Okay.
Garlic Parmesan, you are number one.
Way.
Yep. You are number one. Number one, yes. Again, normally it would not be that. Normally it would be hot wings. But Garlic Parmesan reigns supreme right now because, frankly, my stomach feels a little bit gurgly just thinking about being in here the last time.
Okay.
Garlic Parmesan, number one.
Okay.
Number 2, lemon pepper wings.
Love lemon pepper.
Are we building this? Okay, we are.
Is this a dry rub? Lemon pepper dry rub is what you're talking about.
It is Wingstop wing.
Yeah.
It's a dry rub.
Sure. That's the way Wingstop does it. It's so good.
Number 3, hot wings. Number 4, barbecue wings. I love Wingstop everything.
Okay.
Yeah. Duh. They're from Wingstop.
Okay.
So
that's
yes,
a fair point.
the quarterbacks can take a back seat here for a second.
Okay.
But I'm not the biggest barbecue wing guy. Like, I just think there are better ways to dress your wings than with barbecue sauce.
What would you dress them as? Would you dress them naked and just do them extra crispy?
I would not do that. No, I'm not a sicko. So I have to have some sort of sauce and flavor.
Yes, I have to have a sauce.
Okay.
But I'm not against barbecue wings. I just would say they're low on the totem pole for me because I get barbecue sauce in other ways.
Sure.
I consume it in different ways.
Like dino nuggets.
Not gonna lie.
Dip them in.
The answer is yes.
It's okay.
However, does Wingstop make dino nuggets? If you don't, and you want to start doing it, the Yates household would keep you guys not just in like thriving like you are, but you guys will be generationally wealthy with the amount of chicken nuggets my kids are eating.
Same.
All right, moving forward here. Quarterbacks. This is week 12 specific, right?
Yep.
Bo Nix, clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, he just has the most confidence. He's been playing the best. He's got the best situation going around him. Number 2, Drake May. And it's close. It's pretty coin flippy.
Okay. Yeah, this is close. This is close.
I am sort of waiting for, and by the way, as I say this very quietly, I kind of need this for a miracle purpose.
That's fair.
Drake May, if you were to just take away the turnovers, would have some monster days already behind him. You can't just take away the turnovers, but it feels like to me, Drake May does have a turnover a game that's sort of just like, looks pretty avoidable to me. There was the interception against the Bears where he kind of was like trying to throw the football out of bounds and just like managed to throw it right to a defensive back. Last week, there was the interception at the end of the game, which it sounds like the wide receiver was supposed to run the post and instead he snapped it off and ran a dig across the middle of the field. So it looked like Drake May just threw it right to the safety, but some smart people have educated me that was not the case. You get rid of a couple of those and we're talking about a 20-point per week player, which I know you can't get rid of those for every player, but if you were to put it all together, plus the rushing that Mike's going to talk about right now, pretty interesting fantasy quarterback.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is if you look at, he had a career high 282 passing yards last week, had 2 touchdowns, had, 24 rushing yards last week. So you're like, he had to be like QB6 or something. Right? He was QB 15 because you take those turnovers away. And I guess it was a decent week for quarterbacks. I was a little surprised by that, but he only has 1 weekly finish better than 12. So he's just not there yet in terms of a quality streaming option. And they're playing Miami, 3rd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Only 3 quarterbacks have hit 12, similar to your Lions stat this week, this season. So, so it's a tough streaming option. So I'm with you. You put Richardson over May, or did you do?
I went May and then Richardson.
Yeah, I have them opposite, but I have them 16 and 17. I mean, that's
so it's close there. Any debate on the wings?
Yes.
Mine's mild. I like mild wings.
Okay,
well, I like
that's interesting. Mike,
that's not an option.
Hey, congratulations, Mike Clay. Mike Clay can read.
Okay.
Oh, wait, he can't read.
No, they say I guess they say buffalo wings. It's like mild, medium
or hot
or something. All right, so I don't know. I do like barbecue sometimes, but I like when it's like a mix, like some sort of. Sometimes you can get like a little spicy barbecue sort of mixture or something like that. That's probably
I believe
you have noties on. Do you have notifications on for Wingstop on Twitter or no? Only Excel?
We're about to.
Only Excel, but I need
soon.
Need to.
I'm a lemon pepper guy.
Lemon pepper?
Oh, are you
I
really?
like dry rub. Yeah, I'm in on that. Although I've really gotten into like buffalo wings recently, so like I've been more okay. My wife Rosie has helped like expand my spicy horizon, and so because of that, like her and Manny, they introduced a lot of more heat into my life from that perspective.
Daniel also likes Wingstop because he doesn't have to eat vegetables, and no one's gonna chide him.
I mean,
celery or
carrots, not celery. Celery is just a waste. What's the purpose?
Isn't there a carrot recall right now?
There probably is.
Yeah,
it's not good.
No, it's not good. I took them out of my cabinet and threw them away and got a fresh bag. So
look at that.
All carrots have been.
No, there are a lot of them, a lot of brands, and there was a list of dates and all that. So look that up if you eat carrots and stuff. Make sure you check that out.
You don't just come here for fantasy advice. It's also about how to deal with your vegetables. Here. That's right.
Yeah.
All right,
the wide receivers.
Let's dive into the wide receiver conversation here. Just do it real quick.
Get rid of those carrots.
All right, wide receivers here in Week 12. We're going to start at the top, my friends, and look at that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 1. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 2. Mike Evans, wide receiver 3. A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua round out the top 5. CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Cooper Kupp, Nico Collins, and George Pickens are 6 through 10.
Yeah.
We got to talk about Mike Evans.
Well, can I ask a question before we get there? Of
course.
Is there no way at the beginning of that, like you don't agree with something at the top?
Oh, no. I just, I don't think we've ever ranked him first before. It's just cool to see him on the top of the list.
We were talking about this yesterday. Is like, it's amazing how we spent all preseason debating like which of Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra, or Justin Jefferson deserve to go as wide receiver 3 and likely pick 6 in your draft.
Yeah.
And while, the correct answer so far would be Jamar Chase, it's not like any of them bad.
No.
Right?
No.
It's like, you have wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, or wide receiver 3.
I think the trick this year was like get one of them receivers and then a bunch of running backs.
Yeah. Seems like it, yeah. No, but I just mean like, it'd be one thing if it was like, Chase is wide receiver 1, Amon-Ra's wide receiver 6, and Jefferson's wide receiver 9 or something. No, they're literally 1, 2, 3.
I know.
Like you could have gone wrong, I suppose, but like Chase has not had his bye yet. That is, of course, this week. Like the gap between those 3 players by the end of the week could be like 10 fantasy points more for.
And it is wild because this year the story has kind of been all these major injuries to good receivers and like good value picks at receiver, Godwin and Rashid and so forth and so on, Nico Collins. But really, like round 1 receivers, I mean, for the most part, have been good. Like that, you hit on that. We hit on those guys. The running backs have kind of underachieved.
Yeah.
He's an exception. Yeah. But after that, then it's all running backs. Is not everyone's healthy.
Tyreek was impacted by an injury, even if it wasn't his own.
Although
injury.
he hasn't been that good with Tua either.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Let me say this really quickly, and then we'll dive into it. But when you look at the teams that are on bye, okay, you've got Drake London, Darnell Mooney,
wide receiver 5, by the way, for the season.
Darnell Mooney. You've got Khalil Shakir. You've got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. We're going to skip over the New Orleans Saints. You've got Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams and Brian Thomas Jr. Those are 8 guys that are inside the top 35 at wide receiver that are all out this week.
You'll see that when we get to like, I don't know if we're doing it now, but once you see our rankings in like the 30s and 40s, then that's where you
really see that.
You'll see it when we talk about a wide receiver who's like top 15 this week. I'll tell you why. It's weird in a lot of ways, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Let's talk about Mike Evans, though. Mike Evans coming back, first game back. I mean, we have him ranked wide receiver 3. Full confidence, full go, good to go with him.
That's where I'm at, and here's the reason why, is the volume should be insane, or it should be better compared to where it was, and it was already good, right? I mean, he averaged, if you take away the game in which he left early, even though he scored a touchdown in that game, he left after like a quarter and a half, 7 targets a game in his fully healthy games this season, and that was with Chris Godwin having one of the most gargantuan target shares in the entire NFL. Not all targets are going to go Mike Evans' way, but if he goes from 7 targets a game to 9 targets a game going forward, that is totally reasonable, right? And it will be great for Mike Evans. Mike, I'm sure you can educate the masses more on the matchup against this Giants team, who has been fine in terms of wide receiver points allowed, but I do think there's an opportunity here for Mike Evans.
Yeah, no doubt. Before that, I want to add one thing, which is that Mike Evans, even with all this missed time, still 3rd at receiver in touchdowns, and they're bye too, and end zone targets. He's 3rd in end zone targets with 10, and he's missed all that about basically the last 4 weeks of the season. And to your point, Field, they're playing the Giants. He's likely to draw Deontay Banks in shadow coverage. Banks has shadowed in 10 of 11 games. He has struggled. He's been benched at one point already this season. That game against Pittsburgh, those 10 receivers he shadowed in those games, not just against him, but the whole game averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game. So you feel really good. That's the average of where they've been.
It kind of feels like, I mean, we were waiting to see who was going to step up while Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were out. And obviously we're not getting Chris Godwin back. Yeah, honestly, it was just Baker. I mean, Cade Otton was already Cade Otton. I mean, he was still the guy.
Yeah.
But like, there were no wide receivers, so it does feel like this is a spot where Mike Evans could absolutely smash.
And this number does seem high, I'm sure, to a lot of people. But I think one of the most important things to note, and we are not going to dive into it on this show note, but I'm sure Michael has written about it on wide receiver cornerback, is that you've got two Rams receivers who are normally in a really good spot, and they draw maybe the most difficult matchup in football right now, which is those Eagles perimeter. Hey, any Eagles cornerback, basically. So a little bit of a downgrade for the Rams wide receivers. Malik
downgrade
Nabers
to 5 and 8 for
a little bit though, right? A little bit though, right?
You know what though? That at the end of the day, matchups aside, like volume is king, and that's why. Like when I saw this list, I'm thinking like Lamb and Nabers. I struggled with them this week because it's like, poor quarterback play. I mean, they could be all over the map, but as we saw with CeeDee Lamb last week, just you get piled up. You see 10, 11, 12 targets, you're going to get there. You're generally going to get there.
Let me ask you this. I'll ask you the same question I asked yesterday. More touchdowns the rest of the season.
Oh, I heard that, yeah.
Malik Nabers or CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I
SR3.
I would probably go Neighbors just because their schedule, the Giants' schedule going forward for their offense is the easiest in the league, and it's pretty much across the board, all 4 positions. So
Cutlets saved the day,
dude. I don't know.
Can they Cutlets at Wingstop?
I don't think so.
We're expanding their menu to Dino Nuggets and Cutlets. This is awesome.
Let's look at wide receivers 11 through 20 here. Like we just mentioned, with all those other wide receivers on bye, you may have some shakeup here in the second half of these starters. Starting at wide receiver 11, we got DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill, Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Deebo Samuel. 16 through 20.
I have a lot of questions here.
Terry McLaurin, Ladd McConkey, Courtland Sutton, Juwan Jennings, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Field, what's your question?
My question is Juwan Jennings started the week last week. Thank you very much. Why is he ranked lower than Deebo Samuel? Why would you guys make the case for that?
I wouldn't.
Body of work, getting his share of the carries. His target share is still rivaled, has still been about where it's been in his career when he's been delivering numbers like this. But I agree. He's another one where I'm like, man, the production hasn't followed, but you still.
Where do you think he ranks for the season?
At his,
that sounds like you've got a number.
What does he miss? One game?
One game, yep.
One game,
and then had one game where he played 4 snaps. So call it 2 games.
He's in the 20 somewhere, I think.
Lower than that. Last check, he was like wide receiver 39.
Yeah, it's tough because the usage is there, and he's had a couple good games, but he's just had a lot of duds. So I struggled with that one too. I did.
Juwan Jennings, to me, you can make an easy case for him to be higher than Deebo Samuel.
Agreed.
He is Brock Purdy's favorite target. It's just a matter of fact right now. Whether George Kittle is available or not, I'm still very bullish on Juwan Jennings, but I think we want to talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba instead.
Yeah, I did that yesterday. I mentioned a bunch of things that were really great. Mike, I want to pass the torch on over to you to be able to wax poetically as well about JSN, and then I'll fill in any.
This one's interesting here.
Yeah, it's just target volume, right? 8.7 targets per game. It's been huge this season, but I know where you're going with this. 3 top 10s, 2 in a row. He's been great
and awesome.
30th or lower every other week so far this season.
So 3 finishes inside 30.
Yeah. And there's not a high ceiling against this Cardinals defense. They're mid-pack in fantasy points allowed, but only 2 have reached 20 this year. None have hit 23. So you're probably not going to big high ceiling game. But at the end of the day, again, I said volume is king. I'm going to chase 8.7 targets per game. And he's just getting better. Remember how young he came in? What was he, 21, 20 or something when he was drafted? He was like 20, 21. Yeah. Still very young and just getting better. And it's clear that there's a connection there with Geno Smith that maybe kind of hit its stride when DK Metcalf was out, because it hung last week. He had that career day with DK out, and then they had the bye week, right? And then they come back, and then with DK there, he still had another huge game last week with 10 for a $110. So you got to feel pretty confident about him right now.
Yeah.
Those last 2 games, you just mentioned it, just for what it's worth. 7 for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then 10 catches for 110.
Yeah, by the way, Mike, when I was talking earlier about how, like, if Richardson has a big week again this week, then we're going to be talking about it as a top 10 option next week. Same logic applies to JSN, right? Full body of work, you're like, all right, 3 finishes inside the top 30. Like, are we sure we want to have this guy as wide receiver 12? And it's like, but after the last 2 weeks, you have to start him, right?
I guess so, yeah. It's just it's been more polarizing with Richardson than it's been with Smith-Njigba. It was, 24th in catches last year. Like, he didn't have a high ceiling last year, but he was just kind of a solid and ascending, and then this year now he's really hit his stride.
That's the way that it feels to me, and maybe I'm just wanting to be more optimistic. As the optimistic one of the group here, obviously, Mike's the pessimist. I don't know what you're what's the middle of optimism and pessimism?
Vibist?
Realist? The vibist.
I don't know.
Okay.
Whatever.
We were so excited about what JSN could be coming into this, and now that he had a couple of games without DK, and you watched him smash the way that he did in an offense that throws the ball as much as they do, because Geno Smith is putting up a ton of stats from a volume perspective.
Yeah.
It feels like you're in a spot where it's like he's probably a more efficient Jameis Winston. You know, like you're not worried about the interceptions as much. I wish there were more touchdowns. That's like
Geno?
the one thing.
How about that rushing touchdown last week from Geno? Did you guys see him after the game, what he did, by the way?
No, what'd he do?
Obviously, they were playing the 49ers. The game was in the Bay Area, San Francisco, or wherever, Santa Clara, wherever they actually play. Geno hit the Steph Curry night.
Did he really?
Put him to sleep.
Oh, no, that's so good.
He actually hit both sides like that. I was like, that's kind of ice cold out there.
Ooh.
And that's the kind of thing that, like, that'll get the attention of the fans the next time you come.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mike, since we're ranking things, like we've already talked about, JSN's hot streak, I want to mention some things here that are your favorite things that you're hot on, as well as a couple of Buckeye wide receivers, all right? Here's the list for those of us listening at home and not watching on our YouTube stream, which if you're not, you should check out the YouTube stream. We've got momentum.
Eat it.
Excel spreadsheets, Savi B, NASCAR, and then 3 Buckeye wide receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Field's breaking the studio over here.
I almost broke the
Jackson Smith and Jigba, Terry McLaurin, and Marvin Harrison Jr.
OSU.
All right.
Wide receiver OSU. By the way, they've got yet another wide receiver coming out this year who I think could go in the first round, and Emeka Abuga.
Oh, there you go.
And then, of course, they have Jeremiah Smith, who's a true freshman megastar. Of
course they
do. Cornell Tate, who had a big week this past week, going home. Very cool as well. They're loaded. It's ridiculous. Ohio State every year, man.
Yeah, they're great. All right, so my list here. I mean, look, I had to start. I love so many of the things on this list. I had to start with something that I use every day, nonstop for everything, which is Excel sheets. Of course, that's like
number one.
Yeah, I'm like married to Excel sheets.
It's like
got to be Excel sheets.
We were actually nervous because we wanted to put your daughters on the list, but we didn't want them to see that Excel sheets would be ahead of your daughters.
Yeah.
Mike is not married to the game; he's married to the program, baby.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I have a sheet where I rank them too. Like,
I'm sure.
No, I don't do that.
A lot of factors go into that. It's like the college football playoff ranking, but more
I
complicated.
track all the stuff about them, but
exactly.
I'm going NASCAR second too. You know, this is an interesting one because as we've become like, I don't know about you guys, but as I become more of an analyst of football, which growing up was like just a passion. I was hardcore, psychotic fan of the Eagles, whatever. Like now more objective now. So I need like a different outlet a little bit. Like it's different in the playoffs, but like especially during the season, I'm such an objective onlooker. Now I like, you know, it was the Flyers for a while. I'd watch a little hockey, but now especially NASCAR. That's my like get away from being a rational fan and being, you know, an irrational whatever, and just be an irrational fan and just be able to get angry about it. And
who are you an irrational fan
true.
of within NASCAR?
Mark Martin.
Well, it was Mark Martin. He's retired now.
Jeff Gordon.
Yeah. No, he's for long retired. Yeah.
Joey Logano.
He's still, he's a local guy. He's a champ. Congrats. Yeah, 3-time champ. I like William Byron, a good friend of mine, is a tire carrier. Ryan Patton, a big fantasy football player. Shout out Ryan. So I watch it Sunday. But that's why. And Chase
shouting out?
a friend of mine. Yeah.
Is that like shouting out like the special teams coordinator on a team? You're like, my favorite team is like.
Those guys are odds.
I know, but I was like, who's your favorite racer? Like, who are you irrationally a fan of? And you were like, I like a tire carrier.
Yeah. Well, he's a friend of mine, so I support his driver.
Oh, okay, Got it.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So anyway, love all
Me too. I love Dave Phipp for what it's worth.
There you go. See,
he's a good coach. Do you have a thing that you are like irrationally a fan of?
Yes, the Detroit Lions.
Okay. Outside of football.
It's been 40 years of bad fandom, and now I get to be here like I'm irrationally excited.
That's true. That's totally true. Yeah.
That used to go. So anyway, Excel sheets, NASCAR. I'm going to go JSN next because he's been crushing it as of late. Putting him ranked 14th against Arizona this week. Terry McLaurin next. Got to get a bounce back week. He crushed me. He was probably the reason I lost to Liz last week. So I'm hurting about that one. Although he did it against the Eagles, is where his dud came. So I can't be too upset about that. By the way, he's had 3 duds. 2 were at the beginning of the year. 1 was last week. Other than that, he's had 13 plus every game. So I'm confident he'll bounce back here against Dallas. Next, I'm going to go with a little Savi B in here.
Okay.
Sauvignon Blanc. That's my go-to.
How many glasses deep are you right now? It's 10:38.
I'm 0 field. Okay. It's 10 in the morning. Okay. Later this evening.
Yes.
We'll see.
We'll find out.
Next, I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. Big usage. Excuse me. I'm a little choked up about Marvin Harrison. Doesn't happen like we hope. Allergies kicking my rear end. Much easier schedule going forward for. I
had no idea you were
Marvin
allergic
Harrison.
to Savi B.
And then like all those things are great. We love them. All those things are awesome. I would put them all in the A section. They're all at the top, and then all the way down at the bottom, all the way down. F minus last is when people use momentum as a crutch word.
Wow. Dead last.
Momentum is nonsense.
I disagree with that.
Descriptive,
and
not
you know
predictive.
what? JSN disagrees with that, with the momentum that he has been building on the hot streak that he is on.
Right.
No, that's
By
not.
the way,
That's
I was thinking about why Mike loves the Excel stuff so much, and Daniel brought up not including the daughters on this list. I actually recently, because I was trying to figure out just how far apart my daughters are in age relative to Mike's, and I was like, Mike, how old? Can you remind me again how old your daughters are? And he was like, hold on, let me grab my computer real quick. I got to program into the sheet. I can't remember offhand.
I thought you wanted to know how many days old they are.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, let's dive into some running back rankings here in week 12, my friends. If we're going to start at the top like we always do, and look at who is back on top of our running back rankings. RB1, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Devon Achane, Joe Mixon, and Derrick Henry round out the top 5. 6 through 10 is Jahmyr Gibbs, James Conner, Kenneth Walker III, Kareem Hunt at 9 after a 6-point dud last week, and then David Montgomery. Doth my eyes deceive me? Are there 2 Detroit Lions inside the top 10?
They doth not.
Yeah, they're crushing it as of late, especially. By the way, I just want to make a note on Kareem Hunt because we're keeping an eye on Isaiah Pacheco.
Yes, we are.
This week, obviously, Hunt's going to fall down them ranks. I'm sure they're going to use both for a little while and then kind of feel it out. I assume at some point Pacheco becomes the 1A. I don't know if Hunt will disappear completely. I doubt that. But Pacheco could return this week, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Could, or he might not.
Yes, those are the options.
Additionally, do the Chiefs play next Friday? They do. So there's a chance.
You just answer your own question before you give us a chance to answer.
I was trying to be dramatic in doing so. The Chiefs play this Sunday against Carolina. Then they play the following Friday against the Raiders. Oh. It's possible it's week 14 before we see Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, it's possible. That's why I said just keep
point that out there, which, by the way, it's also possible that Isaiah Pacheco, week 14, plays a little bit. Week 15 plays a little more. Week 16, maybe. They are thinking about February with Isaiah Pacheco. So I just want to put that on the radar. So there's a possibility that for fantasy purposes, he never gets into our top 10 rankings the rest of the season.
So what you're saying is you're not expecting a CMC type usage where in his first 2 weeks back, he has 42 touches, and the other running backs there, Jordan Mason has 3. Isaac Guerrero has 1. So we're not expecting it to be that kind of a situation.
You're not. I also, this obviously could reduce because every game that you play, I think probably increases the chances of going down from here. But Christian McCaffrey currently has played 90.7% of the snaps,
unreal.
Which is best in the NFL amongst all running backs this season. Yes, he's only played 2 games. Mike, I ask you this question. In a vacuum, CMC or Justin Jefferson rest of the season?
I'll McCaffrey. I know, he's played a lot. The numbers have not been there yet, but I think they'll come. Okay. I think he'll get rolling, and it'll look 90% of the snaps, the touches he's going to get. It's unheard of. I've been projected for 21. I think straight up he'll beat him. He'll beat Jefferson.
More edge, little edge, major.
I think it's slight. I think if we were redrafting right now, it'd be a close call at the top.
There's some talk of a trade that might involve those 2 players going down. Yeah.
I feel like this is a situation where if I'm looking at those 2 guys, and you guys can disagree with me if you want. Yeah. I feel like with where these teams are at, 8-2 for the Vikings. Justin Jefferson has been a part of that, but they spread the ball around. They've been finding a handful of different people. Justin Jefferson hasn't been a 20+ point a week guy week in and week out. Whereas it feels like for Christian McCaffrey, they're 5-5. Is that right? These 49ers need him. Need to win, exactly. And they're going to have to continue to lean on him. I feel like the usage that CMC is going to get, not just as a runner, but also at the goal line and in the passing game work. To me, that's what gives Christian McCaffrey that slight edge, because I think his team is going to need him more than the Vikings team is going to need Justin Jefferson.
Interesting question, because I was doing some research yesterday, as I am wont to do. And I was thinking about this because, as I mentioned, I am legitimately discussing a trade with Stefania, straight up Christian McCaffrey for Justin Jefferson. The problem in my case is I've got 4 good running backs in a league, and I am probably a little short at wide receiver. So that's sort of the conceit behind the trade. And I'm thinking to myself, Justin Jefferson, has he been that good? Has he been that dominant? Well, he has 7 or more targets in every game since week 2, 8 or more targets in every game since week 3. But to your point, after going 5 games with 20 or more in 7, he now has back-to-back games with 14.1 or fewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the target share has dipped a little bit as Hawkinson's been more involved in the offense. We've seen some Jordan Addison.
9 and 8 over his past 3
Sam
games.
Darnold's kind of come back to earth just a little bit.
Well, you know what? I think there's a possibility that Kevin O'Connell pinned the tail on the donkey here when he was talking about this. I believe it was with Paul Allen, who's just iconic as the Vikings radio voice. He's great. You've all heard his calls somewhere, the one-handed catch by Jefferson, maybe his best in recent years. He was talking about Kevin O'Connell. Said, listen, I study as much of the league as I can during whatever time that I have that I'm not focused on the Vikings or their current opponent. And he is like, I've been around some great receivers. I am telling you that Justin Jefferson is treated differently than every other receiver in the league. As in, how defenses are defending him is different than every other, not most, not some, every other receiver in the league. That could be at least a little bit of a part of why his numbers haven't been as gargantuan over the past 2 weeks.
Fair. Yeah, and his target share has never been like extreme. Like it's never been just even like Cooper Kupp number or what we saw from Neighbor. It's never been. It's usually been like 29, 28 in that range.
We're not getting like that 35% like you see.
And part of why he was still an elite fantasy receiver is because Kirk Cousins just didn't run at all. He just threw the ball all the time. There's so much involvement in that, so much volume in that passing game. It was up though over that number early this season. That has kind of tailed off now the last couple of weeks.
I still might make the deal. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I feel like you look at this top 10 here. Is there anybody inside the top 10 here really quickly that you are like, boy, that one really catches my eye. I'm surprised that this guy is so high.
I mean, Achane, that's probably a new record for him. He deserves it week to week to be up that high the way he's played. The rushing efficiency has been okay, but the usage in the passing game has been tremendous. Yeah.
Well, as you guys know, I'm a pretty big fan of video games, specifically like sports video games. Do you mind if I do a couple of rankings here as well, if I can get in on this ranking conversation?
Yeah, are we doing?
Sure, yeah. Do you want us to ask you, Daniel? 10? I can ask you, right?
Doing 11 to 20.
I was going to say,
we'll
this is my chance.
All right, Daniel.
So here's what we got. You ready?
Okay.
Yeah.
So of course, Christian McCaffrey, running back 1 this week. He's looking to break that Madden curse.
He is. Yes.
Rank these things: Madden, Tecmo, Blitz, NCAA football, 25, of course.
Yes.
CMC, Joe Mixon, and Jahmyr Gibbs, and Excel spreadsheets.
I mean, CMC, Joe Mixon, and Jahmyr Gibbs. You're talking about 3 guys that are all easy top 10 running backs this week. All right, here's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start it at 1.
Okay.
It's Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, I realize I'm not ranking him there this week, but yes, absolutely I'm biased. How can I not be?
He's got great momentum.
I'm taking my analyst hat off, and I'm putting my fan hat on for everyone at home just so that we know this.
Now. Okay. The reason we add all these other things in here is so that we can provide context and easy to understand and swallow categories here, context, and then you're just using your.
That's exactly what is happening. I am being a biased Lions fan. Although I do have this ranked: CMC, Joe Mixon, Jahmyr Gibbs for week 12 for what it's worth. Jahmyr Gibbs is number 1 on my list. Exactly.
He's the tire carrier of your list.
He is my Sonic. Speaking of video games, he's the only non-quarterback. This is a Liz Lowe's stat because she was kind enough to be able to show up to work this week, Mike, just in case you didn't know that. Yep. Only non-quarterback with at least 12 fantasy points in every single game. And by the way, this dude is so fast. 2 of the 6 fastest plays in the NFL this year. The dude is just unreal. Number 2 on my list would be Joe Mixon. Right now, running back 1 in fantasy points per game with 22.6. 4 games over 23.4 fantasy points. And that floor, he has never scored less than 16.6 fantasy points. If you told me the least you're going to get is 16 fantasy points from a starting running back, of course you would take that. It's been unbelievable what he's been able to do.
Aside of the one he got left hurt. Yep.
Yes, except for, we're talking healthy games. And Fields, you mentioned it yesterday when we were talking about how he is like the Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, had he not gotten hurt with what he has been doing here in fantasy football. And number 3 is Christian McCaffrey. We just talked about all the reasons why. Like, he's still CMC. I think he's going to get all the goal line work. I think he's going to get all the passing game work. This team needs to utilize him as a 5-5 team that is trying to be able to make their way into the playoffs.
Are they ever?
It's a spot where it's like, we got to rely on our guy. And by the way, they haven't relied on Deebo Samuel the way that we thought they were going to. So it feels like he's the number 1 guy in this offense to me.
You just rank them opposite of how you have them ranked?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Okay.
Mike, this is my segment.
Backwards? Are you counting
I don't understand.
Down
is this my segment or is this Mike's segment?
Interesting, Mike.
You literally just rank them backwards from how you have them ranked, though.
Yes, because I'm talking about how I feel as a fan, not as an analyst. I said I took my analyst hat off. Right. I'm doing this as a fan.
So then number 4. The video game.
Yes, number 4. And this is I would do more. You'll find out why. Number 4 to me is Madden, best football video game in history. In part because there's a dynasty mode and you can do a fantasy draft. I love being able to do fantasy drafts with my buddies, whenever we put together long seasons, we'll do like multiple seasons. That fantasy draft to be able to be my own GM, that's where it's at. Even if Madden has kind of fallen off a little bit over the last couple of years, I still feel like it is the best video game from that standpoint. Number 2 on that list, or 5 here, would be NCAA football. Not quite as good as Madden historically because it had to be revived from the dead. Obviously, otherwise, if it wouldn't have died if it was so good. However, they have a team building and dynasty mode, which I think is my favorite part of these kind of games.
Recruiting? Oh my God.
It's so much fun. NCAA football because of that. Number 6 would be Tecmo Super Bowl because of Bo Jackson, greatest football video game player in the history of football video games. Number 2 to me would be Michael Vick in Madden, where he was just like a cheat code when you utilized him. But Bo Jackson, if you are old enough to have played Tecmo Super Bowl, you know how frustrating it was to play against Bo Jackson. Number 7 is NFL Blitz. Because if I wanted to play football with 4 people, I'd ask you 2 yahoos to go out into the parking lot and just throw the football around.
Actually, I would like to do that, actually.
I mean, here's the reason, and I do want to say this. The reason why the video games are at the bottom is because do you know how expensive video games are nowadays? You think I can afford all of these?
A better authority than others. I've heard so many great stories, though, from friends whose kids have gotten old enough to use their phones a little bit. And they're like, dude, all of a sudden I looked up and I've got like a $210 Fortnite bill because my kid wanted some new skins.
Right? Mm-hmm. Dude, in this economy? Are you kidding me? Like, I just feel like because of that, I got to put the running backs at the top and then the video games at the bottom. But I do love my sports video games for what it's worth.
By the way, I agree with your order. I struggled with Madden versus NCAA just because NCAA 14 was a game I played for a decade until the new one came out, which I haven't been able to mess with a lot. It came out right before the season started.
Not during the bye week.
Just like I spent so much time just rebuilding. You know, that's what you do, right? You go to Marshall, turn Marshall into a powerhouse, and then leave Marshall and go to the worst team you could find.
And then you
whoa. You turn Marshall into a powerhouse.
Yes.
Dude, you are the biggest Chad Pennington fan I've ever met. Him and Randy had them as a powerhouse.
Yeah, not in 2014.
Okay, but I'm saying like there was a time where Marshall was 1AA. They were so good with those guys that they had to bump them up to Division I.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I love Pennington from that era.
Rebuild them, not build them into a powerhouse.
I mean, you could say that about most teams, but fair enough. I mean, okay, in NCAA 14, when you turn on, they're like 1 star. They're like a 1, maybe 2 stars.
Okay, got it.
I turn them into like number 1. Okay, we win championships.
Is there a reason why you started with Marshall rather than Kutztown University, or is that not an option for?
They're D2. So you gotta put them in there. They eventually could do that. You could like create the school with their colors. So I did do that at times. I had 10 years. I did all the things.
It's very fun. I love being able to do the dynasty modes where you get to be the GM of that team to be able to build them up to what you want to do. Yeah. All right, let's talk about running backs 11 through 20 here. I'm sure people are ready to move on, and we'll look at these guys
through this because there is a really interesting one here, I think.
Starting at 11, we got Brian Robinson Jr., Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, and Aaron Jones rounding out the top 15. 16 through 20, Chuba Hubbard, Ramondre Stevenson, J.K. Dobbins, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Najee Harris.
There are some not great options starting around like running back 13 this week. I'm not going to lie to you.
Not good options?
Yeah, they're okay, but not great. Like there are some concerns.
I think running back's still strong. I mean, I think you're
like some players that I think are trending down of late, some bad momentum for them, right? Like Aaron Jones has not been nearly as effective of late, but let's talk about Jonathan Taylor.
Let's do it.
He's an interesting one. So here's what we know about Jonathan Taylor is he's going to see a lot of carries every single game. He had 24 last week. That's awesome. We talked about this on Monday. Sight unseen. If I told you 24 carries for Jonathan Taylor, you're playing him in fantasy.
Yep.
That being said, it's harder for him to crack inside that top 10 for 2 very specific reasons. One is over the past 4 games, 12 is the most receiving yards in any of those games. He's not a big part of their passing game. And it probably becomes a smaller part of that passing game with Anthony Richardson under center as those throws to the running backs are replaced by rushing opportunities for the quarterback.
Before we go to the next part?
Yes, please do.
Colts running, I looked at these splits last night. It was very interesting because I noticed his targets down when Richardson is played. Colts running backs have a 10% target share in the 5 Richardson games, 19% in the other 5. It's double. So Taylor has 9 targets in 5 games with Richardson, which is terrible. He has 13 in 3 games with Flacco because he missed some time injured. So he has more with Flacco in fewer games than he has with Richardson. That is definitely a concern.
It's a concern, as is the fact that, as we know, last week, Anthony Richardson got 2 rushing touchdowns, both of the goal-to-go variety. And I mentioned this, I think it was Monday, but everything is relative these days in terms of time. I think the Colts' primary objective right now is to do as many things as they can to make Anthony Richardson comfortable and confident. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the ways in which they can achieve that is by letting him do work around the goal line, right? Rushing for touchdowns feels good for a quarterback. It increases his confidence. I don't know if Mike believes in confidence. He doesn't believe in momentum. I happen to believe in both, and I think the Colts are going to be very smart about how they tap into the skill set of Anthony Richardson and continue to build that confidence back up, which could lead to more goal line work for Richardson and less for Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Not none, but less.
Yeah, I think Taylor he does have 10 carries inside the 5 this season, but yeah, we want to see more of them when Richardson's out there. But that's a reason why this guy who has a ton of touches and a ton of yardage this season when he's been on the field is ranked 13th, and that's a problem. I have concerns with both of those areas as well.
As a numbers guy, I'm just going to say this really quickly. Last 5 games with Richardson. Week 2, 14 touches. You'd love to see that be more, but 135 total yards. Mm-hmm. Week 3, 24 touches, 135 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 4, 24 touches, 108 yards and a touchdown. Yeah. Week 8, 21 touches, 117 total yards and a touchdown. Week 11, that we just talked about, 25 total touches, only 60 total yards, unfortunately. And then he had those 2 goal line carries. I mean, Richardson basically stole both those carries inside the 5, so that's the only reason why he was down last week.
And that's why we're ranking him 13th and not 26, right? I mean,
exactly.
We just little lower ceiling without the receiving and losing some touchdowns.
And obviously we don't love this matchup. Lions have given up the 4th fewest fantasy points to running back so far this year. There have been a handful of running backs that have been able to do a few things against them. However,
3 have hit 15.
Yes, and that's it.
That seems bad.
And this is one of those games where, like, if you see, I mean, I've mentioned this, I know they're not going to be at home, but like their last handful of games, the Lions are just scoring so many points. And if Jonathan Taylor is not a part of the passing game the same way that he was under Joe Flacco, it just feels like that inherent floor is a little bit lower than we would have thought because of that. Yep. All right, let's talk about some tight ends here in Week 12, starting at the top of this one. Tight end 1, obviously it's Travis Kelce. Tight end 2, Brock Bowers. And then you got Trey McBride, George Kittle, and Cade Otton rounding out the top 5. 6 through 10, David Njoku, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith.
There he is.
Sam Laporta at 9, and TJ Hawkinson at 10. We already talked about Jonnu, or I did at least a little bit yesterday on the Waiver Wire show, Mike Clay, so I want to hand the mic over to you. How do you feel about Jonnu, and how are you projecting him, understanding that it feels like he's been the go-to pass catcher in this offense the last handful of weeks?
He has, and I mean, tight end, especially with 6 teams on a bye, a couple injuries, it's not in a great spot, so ranking him inside the top 10 this week I think makes some sense. Because he only really has had 2 good games. But the thing is, he's had volume too. 6+ targets in 5 of his last 6 games. But again, under 12 points in 4 of those 6 games, and had 22+ in the other 2. So he's been a little bit boom bust even with that volume. So I don't want to get too carried away on him, but he's done enough that he's just inside the top 10. By the way, the Patriots have not allowed a tight end to get to 15 points. So maybe a game where he's like, okay, and finishes QB or tight end 8 or 12, something like that, but probably not going to have a huge game.
Yeah, I mentioned this yesterday, but over the last 6 games, I believe it is. 6-game span. More targets, more receptions, more receiving yards, more touchdowns than any other pass catcher in this Miami Dolphins offense.
They don't have any. Do they have any good ones?
You know what? I thought they did at one point. That's been the thing.
Durham Smythe is pretty good. Durham Smythe too. Yep.
OBJ, obviously, we love being able to see what he's doing there.
Like Washington getting him some run. Yeah.
Field. Now that Mike's here, and I don't want to start a feud between you guys because we're all friends here.
We've been feuding for years, so that's fine.
Do you want to be able to give your TJ Hawkinson piece now that Mike is here in person?
It might change this week, but remember last week I was like, Mike, you really think he's going to play more snaps? And he didn't.
Yeah, no, he did not, and it was less of the routes too. Route participation dipped. I wrote about that for the playbook this week. So,
however,
what can I say? You're right. You're
welcome.
Right.
That's a Moana thing.
Yeah, it's a Moana thing. You know that Moana 2. Can't wait to see it next week.
I'm pumped to see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say this though, Josh Oliver, who I talked about, who's been playing really well for Minnesota.
Yep.
Now dealing with an ankle injury.
Ooh.
And Kevin O'Connell, who's usually pretty transparent, does not know whether his availability for this Sunday. He does not know whether he'll be able to play this Sunday, I should say. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see more Hawkinson because they need him.
Yeah, and
Johnny Munt will still play.
I will say this. It was surprising to me because he went from just to say
45 to 46.
45 up to 67 in terms of route participation, and then he dipped all the way back down to where he was 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So that doesn't really compute in my head. I don't know why exactly they did that, but you were right, at least for 1 week.
Computer. Wow.
Mike, I want to know if you've been able to figure this one out, because if you told me coming into the season that the Detroit Lions heading into Week 12 would lead the entire NFL in points scored, I would say, holy smokes, after what Sam Laporta did as a rookie, he must be another top 3 tight end.
We would have ranked him even earlier, or drafted him even earlier.
It's crazy to be able to see in this offense how Sam Laporta has fallen, because even though this team scores, it feels like 30 points a week, I feel like I'm almost projecting him inside the top 10 rather than feeling like he actually belongs inside.
I mean,
the top
he's
10.
had a few good games here recently, which helps your cause. He had the 2-touchdown game. He had another one with some decent yardage. So
yeah, one where David
and there's 6 teams on a bye and injuries. Yeah, that helps him. He is a tough one. It's just you're right. I mean, he's probably going to score 4 touchdowns in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
It's not the fantasy playoffs, the real playoffs.
The actual playoffs.
That's what I mean. And
this would be the Chiefs from last year, right?
Yeah, the way they utilized Travis Kelce. Yeah,
100%. Maybe. I mean, I think it is really hard to understand, but they just have a scheme. They're not afraid to share it with other guys. They're not afraid to throw it to linemen at the goal line. Like
Daniel and I both contend that they might be better served throwing the football more to Amon-Ra.
Like let's
32% target share, or whatever it is.
I just feel like there's a handful of times where it's like they're trying to spread the ball around to enough people. And when you've got a guy that's as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, he should be getting 10, 11, 12, 14 targets a game every single week.
That was our feeling, which again, you can debate it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, this is like when the last year's debate about Josh Allen, like disappointing. It's like,
yeah, that's fair.
He's QB1.
That's fair.
I mean, if your target share is in the 30% range, like, or over 30%, it's like, yeah, it doesn't get much higher.
That high right now?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I believe that. I'm gonna look that up. I'm gonna look that up.
I think I have him projected this week for like 31 or something, like, because that's where he's been for the last month.
How about 31 targets? That would be great.
Oh my God.
It's just the War Room League guy who needs him in a major way right now. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, he's just a fascinating sort of style player in fantasy, because you're like, you want to draft him because you're like, he is just such a high floor. That he's not going to burn you. But then I'm like, well, who's like the opposite of that? Like Jamar Chase is a little more, but no, he's been better. Like he's been crushing it this year. There's just and I don't know. There's guys that feel safe, like Laporta, that bust.
Yeah.
And then there's guys that feel volatile, end up just crushing it.
What did you say you thought his target share was?
Like low 30% so far. I mean, he was lower earlier in the year, but he's picked it up as of late.
29.6.
Wow. Way wrong. That's
Mike.
right. I mean, honestly, Mike, as you sit here and like, one of those tricky guys. No, we are totally nitpicking. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown is not, if your team is like not balling out this year, it's not because of Amon-Ra.
Yes,
like, exactly. He's a beast. He's got touchdowns in 8 straight games.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun.
And he did that. Includes like a little bit of a bumpy start. Remember how bad the Lions were like weeks 1 and 2?
Yeah,
how they
of course I do. Yeah.
What a change.
I hate you. I think you said this honestly, and I'll say this really quickly and then we'll wrap up the show. But wasn't it last year that you were talking, or maybe it was coming into the season, where it was like Amon-Ra has been so good with his target share, but the one area that he could still improve was being able to find ways to get into the end zone a little bit more.
Oh, because he had
last year. That was
touchdowns
last year.
That was heading into last year.
Yeah, I thought the idea was like he's just not going to average enough yards per catch to reach. I thought that my take was I think Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson have a better chance of finishing as wide receiver 1 this year. I think Amon-Ra has a lower chance of busting this year than either of them. It turns out like maybe both takes were correct, right? Because Jamar Chase is going to be wide receiver 1 and Amon-Ra is not going to bust. So anyways,
they're all great.
They're all awesome. They're
so
like the silliest things for us to be debating.
All right. Hey, it was a fun show with you guys. Love doing ranking shows
let's
here.
do it. Yeah.
All right, we're going to be back tomorrow as we usually
carry this momentum
are.
into tomorrow's show.
You know what? I'm about carrying that momentum. I love it.
No.
Meat mop.
I don't. It's just as likely that we'll have a bad show tomorrow as it is a good show.
Oh, Mike, what are you doing?
It's just
wing,
as likely.
wing, wing. Here comes the whammy police once again.
My gosh. Today's show, at least Field and I, were presented by Wingstop. Mike presented by Bad Vibes Only. We love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We're going to be back tomorrow to dive into everything that is Thursday Night Football and our part 1 of the Week 12 preview.
First snow game of the year? It's possible.
It's possible. We love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We will see you tomorrow. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. We'll see you on Thursday.
Later.
You're in the 06